Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat podcast. Very happy to be joining you once again for our weekly dose of Arsenal action and chat about our lives a little bit as well. I'm very happy to be joined. The returning Owen. How you doing, mate? You good, Joel?
I'm good, buddy. Yeah, I'm good. Do you want to know what? If there was ever a time for a hiatus, it was then because seemingly the fan base had gone into turmoil, and thank God that I come back in the week that everything's starting to look up again. So, impeccable timing as always.
Yeah, we had obviously the Fulham draw. We had deadline day, not signing anybody, and it was chaotic. But last weekend things went very well for us indeed. We left it pretty late, but we got the result in the end. The doc is going to be along shortly. Sadly, no Sophie this evening. Sending her all our well wishes and hoping that she recovers. She's not been very well this week. And MK was going to be with us, but sadly has been called into work. So I've got a hell of a super sub for you today because a certain Mr. Drew Thompson joins us today. How do you, mate? You good, Joel?
Yep, tired as always and trending on the X Grump scale as usual, but I'm good.
The X Grump graph is getting into some dangerous zones at the moment. But it's good to speak with you, have you, as always, my friend. So I'm glad to see you good and well. Let's talk Thomas Partey because obviously injured in the lead up to the game against Manchester United. At the moment, or rather this evening, I'm pretty sure that Ghana did play their game in the African Cup of Nations against, I think it was Central African Republic, and they won 2-1, which means that Ghana, I believe, have now qualified for the African Cup of Nations. They won, 2-1 it was. Mohamed Kudus getting the first goal, Ernest Nuama with the second. But Luis Mafuta got an early goal 25 minutes in to kind of create a bit of a scare, because had Ghana lost this game and Angola won, they would have been out. But it does confirm that Ghana will be at the tournament in January, Owen. We're without him now until potentially at least 6 weeks. And now we will be losing him for a period in January as well. Is this tipped you over into kind of feeling that maybe it's time to move on from Thomas Partey?
Yeah, well, it's such a funny sport, football, isn't it? I think around the time that Thomas Partey was first linked and the signing became realistic, I think you said that he was a transformational signing, and I think that's what we all expected him to be. And in a sense, I would say that he has been that to a certain degree. But I think one thing that we're starting to realize, with someone like Granit Xhaka, is one of the best attributes that you can have is availability. And unfortunately, Thomas Partey just doesn't seem to have that for whatever reason. And it doesn't seem like slowing up at all. He's starting to come to the wrong side of 30 now. Not that that's any sort of death sentence in modern day football with the way the players take care of themselves now. But there's no doubt that I think, did you read out a stat the other day that he's only been available for 68% of his games?
I think 64% of games, yeah.
Yeah. So that's worrying, especially when you have such a pivotal position in the team as Thomas Partey does. In regards to the international duty, look, injuries are going to happen, regardless of whether he's playing in an Arsenal jersey or a Ghana jersey. He's a professional footballer. If he's available, he'll play for Arsenal, and if he's available, he'll play for Ghana, and that's just sort of running the risk. Part of the risk that you have to take. What I would say is that yes, it has tipped me over the edge, in regards to what we do with Thomas Partey come potentially not January, because notoriously January is difficult to get those types of signings over the line, those big sort of marquee signings over the line. Not that it would have to be an out and out replacement now with the acquisition of Declan Rice. That could be maybe put forward into what, still have to see how Kai Havertz develops, but it could be put into somewhere else. But there's no doubt for the wages that he takes up, for the position in the squad that he takes up, for the age profile that he's starting to hit, and with, most importantly, that injury record, is that is starting to become a big concern that I don't think we can ignore anymore.
Yeah, it is, and I think that stat of 64% of games being available for is a real frustration. Beyond anything, we will be without him again for the home game against Man City, just like we were last season. We found out hours before that game that we weren't going to have Partey, where we've got a little bit more time, and of course Declan Rice as well available too this time around. Doc, good to see you. Good to have you joining us as well. How are you doing, my friend? You good, Joel?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
No, always a pleasure. I feel like I've got my two grumpiest responders in one show, in Drew and yourself, which is great. Really, the tone is like a real monster.
I say measured and having perspective.
Measured and perspective is certainly, I think, how Drew likes to call himself of his views as well. We'll come to you, Raj, in a second with this Partey stuff. But Drew, yes, reports are at least 6 weeks out with this groin issue. We're still waiting for kind of confirmation on any kind of detail about what it is specifically. We know that it's apparently a groin problem. We don't know everything regarding grades of issue surrounding it. We first heard from the Ghanaian national team that it was a couple weeks. Arteta then said it was a few weeks. And now we think it was Sammy Mokbel, the Mail, that said at least 6 weeks and after the international break. So how does this kind of make you feel about his situation and where Arsenal go from here? And also knowing now that Ghana are involved in the AFCON in January as well.
I mean, I kind of feel like if you have any African player on the books that comes from one of the big sides, you have to expect they're going to go to AFCON usually without, barring some sort of like catastrophic end of results for them. So when we bought Partey, we knew that was going to be part of the issue, but I don't think anyone of us expected him to have such fitness issues since coming to Arsenal. I think that's kind of like where people maybe are voicing their frustrations towards. And I understand that 100%. How I'd go on from here, I kind of got in this chat about 2 days ago on Twitter where I had said, at this point, I'd rather just move on from him next summer. And I do think bringing in Declan Rice now sets us up for that quite nicely. Obviously Rice has shown he can play in the 6 in our system. That's an immediate replacement and long-term upgrade on Thomas Partey, which is fine. Him featuring at right back provisionally, depending on who's fit and available. Long-term, I think we're okay there too. Some people were talking about that's why we should go on and got even Fresneda when we didn't. Whatever it is, it's okay. I do think overall the squad is fine, even when he's not fit. I think Jorginho is still criminally underrated by a lot of our fan base because of his age profile and in certain aspects of who he is from a physical standpoint. But he's one of the prime players that we can utilize in terms of ball security, keeping possession, distribution, transition play. So I think playing Jorginho more than maybe some would have wanted to in the next 6 to 8 weeks might ruffle some feathers, but he should be more than serviceable enough to go to places like PSV and play well if he plays.
Yeah. Or
rotate in the league, get the cups, that kind of thing. So I'm hardly panicking at the moment. It's like Doc, measured, calm, not like throwing headfirst into the whole cataclysmic kind of conversation pieces that you see on social media. So I'm fine with it, but again, I do think it kind of, and I agree with Owen and you, I do think it solidifies the fact that we should probably move on from him when we can. And I was happy to move on from him from this summer for that exact same reason. If we had gotten a decent enough bid from whoever, I was fine with watching him go. And then also conveniently with Sambi Lokonga's loan, a full year, kind of at Luton will show maybe if he develops well enough, he can come in and then be that second or third choice behind Rice, depending. And if not, we know we have the money to go out and buy a replacement if we need to. So all things considered, I think we're in a good place, and there's no reason for us to be frustrated by it personally. So,
yeah, right, fair enough. Good points, well made. I'm curious, Doc, to get your thoughts on this, obviously, because we've now seen so many times where we've lost Partey. Drew's brought up a great point in Jorginho and having him available to us and the depth that he adds to the team. El Nenny's also expected to be back this month, is my understanding too. I had a chat, actually pulled him to one side after the game against Man United and was like, Mo, when are you back? And he said back soon. So yeah, that's certainly a positive, and it's understood. I think my colleague Kai Karnak of Football London's reported it is September that he is expected to be back. So that's good. But what are your views on Partey, his availability, and where we should go with him from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think his availability speaks for itself, right? With the number you gave, 64% availability. I think the fact that he came in last day of the window, right? I think it's been a lesson learned for the club because he wasn't given time to adapt to the type of intensity required of him over the preseason. Whereas this season, obviously, we went out and did our work much earlier to allow these guys to come in and be with the fitness coaches and be with the physios. That gives you a lot more ramp up time and understanding of that player and who they are, just from a familiarity issue, from a testing metrics aspect, rather than coming on the last day. So you're already into the season. And that's one part of it to me with Partey. And then I think the other part of it is, we know once you have a soft tissue injury, it's the biggest predictor of future injury for that same area. So, he's had multiple thigh muscle injuries. He had a hamstring. He actually recovered from that quite well, hasn't had a recurrence. And then I think Mikel said on this one, it's a groin or thigh or somewhere in between. That could be, again, hip flexor. We don't really know. But it all seems to be related to that same area. And so once you can get into that kind of, that cycle of risk, it then becomes, obviously, you're at higher risk. And then playing him at right back, which brings along different positional demands, which he was likely trained for over the summer, especially at right back. You're now going to have more sprints, quantity of sprints, intensity of sprints, duration of sprints, and now you're involved in more change of direction as well. It's a different physical demand on your body compared to the 6 he was playing. And even last year when Holding was in, we saw him get fatigued when he was playing, had to cover more ground for Holding and make up more ground. So I think it's a player we've seen who has some physical decline in general. Then you add in all these other aspects, right? And I agree with everyone else here in terms of that. If you can get a good offer for him next summer, provided you can, not even provided, I think you can find a good enough replacement for him now that we have Declan. I think it's probably going to be time for him to move on.
Yeah. See, I just wanted to jump in there. 2 points to make. First of all, I think we're probably all doing the player a disservice by forgetting to mention the fact that he's an absolutely phenomenal player when he is fit, and I think that he provides, and even in his absence, as good as Declan Rice and everybody else has been, is he provides something that I don't think anybody else on the pitch can do, which is he's that pressure release valve. Nobody takes the ball from the defence and transitions it into attack as well as Thomas Partey does, especially with multiple markers on his back, being able to turn and release that ball into the more established ball players in the side. But one of the things I wanted to throw back to Raj here, and this is in regards to a couple of players, and this may be the best question I've ever asked, or the most stupid thing I've ever asked as well. So it could be one or the other, Raj, but just play
this
it with
better
me here.
Be good now. I tell you built this up.
So I remember watching Urian Timber in pre-season and then watching him live in against Nottingham Forest at the start of the season. And one of my favourite things that he'd done was that drop the shoulder and shimmy and explode the opposite way and completely leave his marker for dead. And that got me thinking, is there specific traits in players, say, for example, with him, with that sharp turn and explosive run that leaves him maybe more susceptible to an ACL injury? And when we look at Thomas Partey in particular here, it's always those calf and groin and muscle injuries. And, we all know the nickname that he has, the octopus. He's renowned for outstretching legs and nicking balls away. Is there traits in players that make them more susceptible to certain injuries? And is there any other one that isn't obvious? For example, the reoccurring injury with Gabriel Jesus. Is there anyone else in the squad that stylistically you look at and think, "Ooh, you're a culprit for a big injury"? Or
I wouldn't say it's so hard to say with traits in that regard, just because you can always, theorize about it, right? With Partey stretching out more, potentially puts more stress with Timber's turns. But really, I mean, it's so difficult to say in that regard. I mean, you can look potentially for certain biomechanics with how guys are turning. But then the biggest thing I can also look at, we know the biggest risk factors are previous injury and then increase in load, whether that's intensity, amount of minutes. Those two are the biggest well-known factors, right? And then the other one that we will never know about is how are they being prepared physically, right, for those positions. So, I mean, if you look at Timber's injury record, like, it's pretty pristine. So was Partey's. And so we know that first season in the Premier League, there's a jump in intensity. We know early on in this season, there's more injuries because of the jump in intensity as you go from pre to real season. And that's just part of the risk that comes with football. And I think especially for players who are new to the Premier League. I think that's why, in my opinion, Vieira has been handled quite well. Allow him to adapt because he's extremely slight physically, and he was playing in a league that you could argue was, 2 or 3 notches below physically what the Premier League was, whereas perhaps La Liga is maybe 1 notch or something like that, right? And so, yeah, I mean, you can look for those traits. It's hard to say without doing actual mechanical assessment. Even then, it's not really definitive in that regard. And so, yeah, it's a hard question to answer. There's so many variables that come into that.
The best question you've ever asked, get the best answer you've ever received, Owen, or
I think Raj has just shown that our level of friendship, that he politely told me that I was stupid in the most intelligent way I've ever heard.
No, it's not.
Thank you.
No, it's not stupid. It's just so hard. There's so much great. When it comes, there's so much. I think it's the hardest part, trying to explain fitness and injuries. There's so much we don't. There's so much gray area. Even if I'm like the provider, it's all probabilities. If you don't have any information, now you're just really shooting in the dark, which is why social media, seeing the opinions on social media is always hilarious. Because you have untrained people shooting in the dark. So it's just that's a whole different conversation.
I love it. Lovely stuff. Yeah. So in short, it's frustrating. I think that there is scope for Arsenal to move on from Thomas Partey, and in the future, it's going to be difficult. That's very obvious to find a player of the caliber to do that. I did a piece yesterday talking about Yusuf Fofana maybe being someone that Arsenal might want to look at. From Monaco, he's only got a year left, which is an option, by the way. It's not been activated yet. He actually has, just over 6 months left on his Monaco contract. Technically, there is a year to extend that, which obviously would be, you'd imagine, activated. But if the price tag that Nottingham Forest agreed, which I think was around 35 million euros, is any guidance, that would be a steal, in my view, to try and take a player of that level of quality. Lit up the Emirates in the Emirates Cup when he arrived and had a very good season last year in Liga. Moving forwards, with it being the international break, that means a lot of our players are, playing or not. Me and Owen were just talking off air about the fact that William Saliba has not started or yet come on at the time of recording between the game of Ireland and France. Ireland currently finding this. Is it still 2-0, Owen, at this time? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, no, that's better. I don't even want to look at this stage.
It could be worse.
2-0.
2-0 still right now. But yes, at the time of recording, no William Saliba yet. Oh no, he is. He's come on. He's come on for Lucas Hernandez. So he is now on in the second half. But we want to kind of reduce, I feel, the load on these players, Owen, and Bukayo Saka in particular. As England's real only natural right winger, I know Foden can play there. I guess Rashford could play there if you wanted him to. For you, is it a frustration that Southgate just seems to play him continuously in every game?
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's even more of a frustration for England fans that Southgate has no variation in his lineups whatsoever by the looks of things, with the likes of Harry Maguire seemingly being nailed on the start some of their games. But in regards to Saka in particular, yeah, it's a worry. Of course, it's a worry. But at the end of the day, I think you have to take into account that this is the guy who's just picked up England's Men's Player of the Year for the second running year. I think that sometimes when we watch Saka week in, week out, for Arsenal, it's sort of we become numb to the fact that just how brilliant this guy is and how pivotal he can be in winning, drawing, or losing a match. I think it may have been Tim Stillman on the Arsenal Vision said that it's bad. You know that you're spoiled when we're saying that Bukayo Saka hasn't been playing well, but he's still making game-winning contributions, whilst he's in bad form. So can you really be spiteful towards Gareth Southgate for picking the player? At the end of the day, he's got no loyalties to Arsenal. It's he's there to win matches for England, and I think if any of us were in that situation, he would be one of the first names on the team sheet for sure. So it's better than the alternative. For years and years, we were going, through international breaks, having no interest to watch any teams because the vast majority of our players didn't even make it on to the national squads. And look at it this time round, it's just good to see all the players getting the recognition that they deserve for the performances that they've been putting in.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point. You have to raise the argument surrounding, England and Southgate and what their prerogative is. I just feel like, Drew, is there an argument that even for Southgate, knowing how much Saka is playing right now, and knowing that, based upon who England's opponents are in their qualification, the likelihood is even with or without Saka, they're going to qualify. So do you think it's even within, Southgate's kind of prerogative to give him rest where possible so that when it comes to an international tournament like the Euros at the end of the season, he's had relevant rest throughout the campaign? Or am I just being uber selfish from an Arsenal point of view?
Maybe a bit of both. I kind of feel like, I don't know if you get the same level of scrutiny when Deschamps constantly plays Mbappe, when he doesn't need to, Neymar constantly play for Brazil, when he didn't need to, Messi for Argentina, when he didn't need to. The fact is when you have players of that level, and we can probably now say with complete certainty that Bukayo Saka is a world-class talent, they're always going to play, period. Whether that's for the club, for internationals, managers want to use their best players as often as possible. So, and also for England, if given the talent pool that they have, they're going to be a front runner for the Euros. So it's maybe Southgate's thinking is he wants some measure of continuity with his selections, so that it gives them the best possible chance to have that springboard to go on and maybe win the Euro, where I would say most experts probably put them in the best 3 or 4 sides in Europe at the moment, given talent expectations, the level they can go. So why would he not play him? Obviously from a bias standpoint, I'm every time he steps on the pitch, I'm hoping he doesn't get injured for 6 months or whatever. But the reality is, as Arsenal fans, we've always wanted to have, again, players of this level, this recognized level, world class. Terry Henry, same thing when Henry was on international duty, he was constantly playing, right? So we always were, 1 injury away from being without arguably the best striker in the world at the time. So, we can kind of wait with bated breath, but I don't get frustrated by it. It just is what it is. If you have a player of that level, they're going to play. So I don't.
Can I ask you this here, Drew, real quick? And this is me teeing you up again to put me in the mud. Why are we seemingly the only club that doesn't do the thing of he's injured? You look at maybe big players for other clubs in the past have coincidentally had an injury coming into international breaks where they've been left behind, and then miraculously they're fit come the game week that the club games are back. Why are we seemingly one of the only clubs that don't pressure players into doing that? And do you think that that's a good thing that we don't pressure players into doing that?
I think it's a good thing, because I think Arteta, as part of my perception is a part of the culture that he's instilled is accountability as well. If a player genuinely feels that they might not be fit enough to play or to start, they'll either remove themselves from the camp, or they'll go to, in Saka's case, go to Southgate and say, listen, I'm carrying something, can you not start me this match or whatever, if it's feasible. And I think that's also really important, because it shows Arteta can trust the players, shows that players will feel as though they're not being sort of, grandfathered by the manager too much, schoolmaster kind of stuff. And I think that's also really important. And also, not for nothing, but Saka is still quite young. The more he plays, the more he's going to develop anyway. So at that juncture, the only reason why Erling Haaland didn't play today for Norway is because they played Jordan in a friendly. But if it was a qualifying match, he would have started. He'll start the next one, when they play. I forget who they have coming up, but he'll start that for sure. But in that sense, why would you play him against Jordan? There's no reason to, really.
Odegaard played.
Odegaard did play, but they don't really have anyone in the team that can really replicate what Odegaard does. The closest person is Hugo Vedlesen, but he's one international.
True, but the same reason I'd argue that they didn't play Haaland, in this game, and I'd argue in a friendly against Jordan, what's the point of playing Odegaard?
I don't disagree with you.
Haaland get that treatment where Odegaard doesn't.
Well, he's also the captain, so I feel like maybe that's also part of
the puzzle. I don't
care. Well, fair enough. At least you're honest about it.
I don't care.
And again, I also understand, it's something I'm saying, it's wrong to feel like you want your best players to be wrapped in cotton wool when you can. But I also see that international managers, they aren't beholden to club managers. They have their own plans. they kind of have to go with it, and you have to hope for the best, really. So, yeah.
Doc, fatigue, lots of games. I know you talk a lot about kind of the number of games players play and the increased risk that has related to injuries. So what are your views on Southgate in England's use of Saka?
I mean, I'm kind of with everyone else. It comes to territory. Top players are going to play. I mean, Mikel doesn't rest Saka. Why should Southgate rest? Why should Southgate rest him, right? So, like, that's his value. Like, he has a very, very unique profile on that right side that not many players have in the world. So, and then, you know, it's the same question you can have for Mikel that you have for Southgate. So, of course, ideally, yeah. But it's just, you know, when you have top players, they're going to play internationally. You hope, like you said, you know, you get rest for some, you know, those teams like Jordan. I think in Odegaard's case, because he is the captain, I think he always wants to play. And that from that aspect, is that why he played? He might just feel a little bit more kind of responsibility to play. But yeah, I think just, you know, top players, you're going to play a lot of games. It is what it is. That's why you need some depth in your squad.
I realised I'm wearing a PSG t-shirt. I went out for a run and just chucked it, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm wearing a PSG t-shirt on the show talking about Arsenal." Just realised that. That was a present, by the way. I didn't actually go. I don't like Paris at all. It's not a place I plan on going back to. Yeah, I think, and Tom's right in the chat. You know, I'm not a fan of international football, mainly because it interrupts Arsenal's flow and season and momentum, and I have to write about Arsenal every single. I say have to, like it's a chore. I write about Arsenal every single day, and the international break makes it particularly challenging at times to be doing 4 or 5 pieces about Arsenal. I mean, I had to do the task of discussing whether James Maddison's recent form is one of the reasons why Kai Havertz is receiving as much stick as he is, which was not a pleasant thing to write about. But I think that when it comes to international football, there are, to some extent, some benefits. Players that aren't necessarily getting the minutes, like Jakub Kiwior, for instance, will play for Poland, and I think that'd be really good for him. Zinchenko has just come back to fitness, gets an opportunity to play. Raj, just quickly, Gabriel Jesus getting called up. You know, he's only just come back from that injury. Were you glad to see that from a recovery standpoint, or were you frustrated to see that, to know that maybe he plays more minutes than he should be at this point?
No, I was glad to see it. He's at the point where he needs to regain match fitness. The only way to do that is to play in matches. So I think we saw that he's I think in his last cameo, he looked really, really good from a movement perspective. So now you're at the point where he's pretty much fully cleared to play. And if there is a minutes restriction, you know, they'll know that. But the only way to be prepared for games is to play in games. And that's why there's a risk when you're first reintroduced, because your body hasn't adapted yet. So I was glad to kind of see. I think it'll help him a little bit.
Again, I thought it was horrific. Just my view.
That's a trend.
Yeah, absolutely. Owen Thomas says, what's your thoughts on Ben White not even getting a look in for England yet? Maguire. And not just Maguire, but Etifax, Jordan Henderson has been picked. And who's the other one that's really left field?
Calvin Phillips.
Calvin Phillips, yes, is the other one that's been picked as well. What do you make of the decision making there?
Yeah, look, it's no secret I hold no love for the men's England national team whatsoever.
Why? I have no idea why you would not have any.
That's a podcast in itself. But especially under Gareth Southgate, and because the thing that Gareth Southgate sort of sold this vision on when he first came in was that it was going to be a meritocracy, that people were going to be awarded for their form regardless of what club or what league they play in. And for a while that sort of rang true. People did get sort of these, as you said, left field opportunities in a positive way, but it's really, I think, starting to turn into a bit of a boys club now, where people get in terms of relationships with the manager and reputation and around the group of players, rather than how they're actually performing, how they're actually playing. You know, the fact that, like, these guys aren't even kicking a ball. It isn't even like they've been injured and they're just returning. They literally, they're on the fringes of their club sides. I think it's great. I love it. I love how annoying it is to everybody. But the one thing that you would say is, who instead of Harry Maguire? Do you think Ben White is the one that we mentioned there? There's obviously a rift there with the coaching staff. There's rumours that have been coming out that I won't even give any time to whatsoever, speculating around what those are because we have no clue. We remember the unfortunate news that we heard around the time that he did return home from, I think it was the Euros or the World Cup, the Euros. Yeah. So listen, what has happened, I don't know, but something has happened, and I would say in the case of Ben White, he doesn't seem like a character to me that this would really bother him whatsoever. I'm pretty sure he would actually probably, judging by his character, find it funny. He's just sitting there riding it out until a new manager comes in, which in my opinion won't be overly long. I think this is probably Southgate's last run at a competition, and I think that the next manager that comes in, Ben White, is probably back in the door.
I saw a report the other day suggesting, and Culture Mark says this, about like Pepe being considered by the FA. Why would Pep do that to himself? Like, why would he take that job? Goodness me.
Yeah, somebody made a good point, though, is that the fact that he's such a narcissist and the fact that he's so egotistical, to
the
put
best
himself.
managers usually are, to be fair.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like, look, I don't know. I'm not an England fan. The two boys, from what I understand, aren't England fans. So Tom, as somebody that loves international
Look at that
football,
indifference, both of them.
yeah, if you don't love them, you hate them. But this is, remember the golden generation of Beckham, Lampard, Gerrard, all these players. This is a golden generation of players that should really be winning some tournaments now. And I think that, like, Jesus,
that's why it's criminal that Gareth Southgate is the manager of this golden generation. It's criminal. Mm-hmm. Like, if England don't get a better coach in after, at least if he isn't gone after these Euros, and people say, oh, he got England to a European Championship final, he got England to a World Cup semi-final. No, he cost England the European Championships. He cost England a World Cup final. Mm-hmm. That's the way I view it. A better coach would have got more from that England team in those.
I was just about to say, you could say that. I think how far England went is a testament to how good your player pool is, but a better manager wins both the Euro and the World Cup most likely, or at the very least it is in the finals in both. Yeah. Because I do genuinely think that, like I said before, like your current crop of players, we don't have to name them all, is probably, I would say, top 3 or 4 in the world. So in Europe, they're probably top 2. I struggle to think who's
I don't think there's a
than
team
the
on the
overall
planet
squad.
they should go up against thinking they'll lose, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Well, you will if you start Harry Maguire, but that notwithstanding, obviously.
Yeah. I know.
But yeah, I do think, and just quickly on the whole Pep thing, I do think that, I don't know, what's he going to do next? Go back to Barcelona, maybe manage Spain, but Spain I wouldn't touch right now for obvious reasons, given how bad that federation is now shown its true colors, truthfully. He's done Bayern, I doubt he'd ever go to Italy at any point, or PSG. I think he holds himself in too high regard to go manage in France or Italy. So I do think England is actually not the worst shout for him, really, if he ever had the chance to.
To be Mikel's assistant.
So who knows?
Being Mikel's assistant, yeah, invert it. That works out for me too. So, yeah.
Well, I think an interesting thing, one thing on Southgate was Drew mentioned with Mikel and the culture he's created with players having accountability and kind of that young, modern culture for modern day footballers. I think Southgate might be the antithesis of that. And maybe that's why he doesn't like Ben White, because White, everyone gets on him, doesn't watch football, whatever. It does not matter, right? But it's certain managers who understand what's important and what's not important, right? Like White's training level, his injury level. Holding said he played through a grade 2 hamstring tear. Like, that's what matters, not like these little, who knows what else, Southgate, these red herrings don't matter. So this is outside. I don't know the guy at all, but like that's the perception I get of him. And from what I've heard from how the boys club aspect, kind of how inflexible he is, to me, that's like the opposite of a modern day manager like Mikel, where Ben White has thrived.
He loves his post-match meals, I can tell you that. I'd never, ever see him in the mix zone without some food in his hand. That is the way. That's his tactic of avoiding us media, is that I'm eating. No, that's the way he gets away with it. That kind of rounds off the injury international scene stuff. We have got it on pretty good authority now that Nicolas Pepe will be joining Trabzonspor as before the Turkish window closes. It's still a bit up in the air as to what's happening regarding a fee. What we do know is Arsenal will be saving his £140,000 per week wages for this season, which obviously is a big benefit. But we're still waiting to kind of find out whether it's a termination. I've seen some reports suggesting that it is. I've seen other reports suggesting Arsenal are looking to try and get at least €3 to €4 million. So, we'll have to wait and see for some clarification on that. But what with it coming to an end of what has been a glorious Arsenal career for Nicolas Pepe, I want to ask the guys what their favourite moments of Nicolas Pepe is. Owen, we're going to start with you, mate. What is your favourite Nicolas Pepe moment?
This is potentially a silly one because I'm pretty sure did we lose this game? Under
Probably.
under Unai Emery, I think it was away at Anfield. And yeah, I'm pretty sure we lost 2-1 in that game. But Nicolas Pepe, it was one of his first outings really for us, I think it was, and he absolutely had Van Dijk and Robertson on toast. And say what you want about Nicolas Pepe, but he put fear into defenders when he got one-on-one with them running at pace. I've never seen Van Dijk back up. I think it was, do you want to know when it was? It was exactly, remember the time that Liverpool fans were boasting about that Van Dijk hasn't been dribbled past in X number of days, and it was something really impressive. It was genuinely impressive. And Nicolas Pepe broke that record for Van Dijk, and they were just terrified of him. I was there when he scored his first goal, a penalty against Villa. I think it was that game that we come back and won 3-2 after Maitland-Niles getting sent off. It's sad though. I'll say that. I know this is a moments thing, but the one thing I will say is it's sad, and I think that in a lot of ways he was a scapegoat for and the poster boy for a terrible situation at Arsenal that really probably wasn't his fault. And to be honest with you, where he is in his career, where his most probable destination at this point is going to be, I think, is beneath his ability and what he can actually do with his career. It's a bit of a sad end to what was an amazing signing at the time.
Yeah, I remember, obviously we were linked a lot with Wilfried Zaha that summer. And when we were linked to him, it was a kind of a case of, like, really, Arsenal are going for Pepe. He's like the guy that's being talked about as like the winger of the season at Lille. It just was the complete wrong situation, a complete wrong system, complete wrong club. But then, of course, Unai Emery, the man that signed him, a man that didn't actually want him as the primary option because he wanted Zaha, is then replaced by somebody that wants him even less than Unai Emery did. It was never a great situation. But Drew, what's your moment of his Arsenal time?
I don't have one. Like I generally don't have
one I gave you if you wanted.
Yeah, I guess my favorite moment is him leaving, I guess. And if not for nothing, because I just kind of feel like...
the disgust.
I mean... But you kind of highlighted it for me. I just kind of feel like I don't think Nicolas Pepe was ever a bad footballer. And I think a lot of fans forget that he actually has quite a bit of talent. You don't perform that well, even in France, and even the discourse around France, I think, is also misguided, but you don't perform that well and not be a talented player. I just simply think that it's a period in our recent history that I choose to forget because it showed just how dysfunctional we were as a club. In terms of how we were being run, the fact that, Sanye was here, the fact that, the Unai Emery regime, which is frustrating to think about, the disconnect there, the fact that for a time he was our most expensive player, and look at how big of a flop he was. It's just like, it's a moment I choose to forget. But it also is a moment I choose to remember because it shows just how we should not work as a club moving forward. And I think, if anything, that was kind of like a canary in the coal mine kind of moment. Like if you keep going the United route, essentially, bad things are going to happen, right? So maybe my favorite moment is the fact that it was a big lesson for us. So, and I can put a positive spin on that one. But in terms of like how he was on the pitch for us, I think he had some fleeting moments where you saw what he could do, but it was never, as you say, the right situation to really get that out of him on a week-by-week basis, to the point where you could talk about him in the same vein as someone like Alexis Sanchez, who I think so many fans actually do miss for a lot of different reasons. So, yeah, I mean, good luck to him. I do think, maybe he'll have a good landing spot to kind of rehab his career for however much of it is left. But yeah, it was such a bad situation that I just choose to it's over with and done with now. There's no more discourse about can he rehab, should we rehab him, that kind of thing. It's just we move on, and then we're in such a much better place And I guess if he had to be like that shining example of what not to be, then I guess we can be thankful for that in a way. So
yeah, I do. I think there's something to be said about him being a good deal in the sense that it teaches Arsenal what they shouldn't do. And I think that might be something that if we hadn't have done this deal, maybe we do deals. We would have done other deals. That could have been more detrimental. Who knows? Raj.
Yeah, I actually have two favorite moments, and they're both FA Cup during the lockdown year. One was I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was an offside goal first half when Maitland-Niles was
Against
on the
Chelsea.
left. What was that?
I think it was against Chelsea, wasn't it? I think
I
it the
believe
final?
it was.
Yeah.
I believe it was ruled offside where Maitland-Niles kind of saw some of his potential moving up, kind of the profile like that Mikel likes now, and the ball was played to Pepe and he finished it, but he was offside. Second one, I think, was for City the match prior where he's on the right-hand side, plays the ball to his left, and he but he crossed the ball far post where it was headed for the goal. So those are my two favorite, just because I saw some of the triggers that Mikel wanted to play with him. But, in the end, it was just it was a mismatch, right, of player, environment, time. Not many people have really come out of that time, being that successful. So it's just, one of those very expensive lessons, but, the lessons that hurt are the ones that teach you the most. And hopefully, not hopefully, I think we've learned a lot from it, like Drew said.
Yeah, I think that the other goal you're talking about was against Man City, where it was kind of that fast move. Lacazette plays the ball to the right-hand side. Bellerin plays it up to Pepe. He cuts in, crosses to Aubameyang, who kind of launches his foot in midair, and it goes across Ederson, I think. Or, no, it wouldn't have been Ederson. Would it have been Caballero, maybe, in goal for City that game? It would have been their second keeper. But, yeah, certainly that was... Yeah, up there. For me, it's his 2 free kicks against Vitoria. That was hilarious. We were like 2-1 down at home. Unai Emery's career is like in complete tatters at this point. And you bring on Pepe and he scores a free kick in the 80th minute, and then he scores another free kick in the 92nd minute in exactly the same fashion as the first. That was kind of one of those moments like, this guy's got loads of talent. Like, it just chuck him on every set piece.
But even ironically, I think I even remember, these guys that when a manager's on the brink, sometimes they almost edge the team on to lose. I remember some people on Twitter was like, for God's sake, this would have got Emery the sack, and this is a one-time Pepe show.
He saved Emery's career for a short amount of
But let's not forget, like, you compare him statistically in terms of goal contributions in that season, he was very good. Not very good, but
17 or 18 or something like that.
Yeah, but he was quite good.
Yeah.
Like, if you compare him to the likes of Anthony or Jadon Sancho or whoever, name X, whatever winger, he fares out quite well statistically, but as you say, just a complete mismatch. But all we can do is wish the guy the best, and good luck in Turkey.
Yeah, and genuinely, I do wish him luck, and I hope he succeeds. Not because I want, people coming out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, we never should have let him go," just because I want to see him do well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. With it being the Sleep Arsenal Repeat podcast, we like to end the show with a section about kind of our health, fitness, mental health, and all of that lovely stuff. And each week, I ask the guys how their kind of personal goals are progressing. Of course. Raj talked to us about overtraining. I think it was a few weeks ago, and kind of getting things in order. And I don't think we managed to get Owens because I don't think he's been it. So talk to me, Owen, about what your personal goal for this season would be briefly, and then we'll jump to Raj before he has to shoot off.
To survive at this point is probably the thing. Fitness goals aren't going that well, to be honest with you. But listen, I get married in September next year, almost a year coming up now. So
Really?
not this September, the September after. Yeah, man, I'm putting it off as long as I can. Trust me. So I'm going to be kicking into gear for that. Traditionally, I always just did a lot of running, did a lot of sort of cardio based stuff for weight loss, getting into shape, but. The doc will tell me if I'm wrong or right here, but a lot of people are telling me weights actually are one of the best things for helping to lose weight and get in shape and stuff like that. So I don't know. I was considering a personal trainer, but again, it's a minefield of people that are taking advantage of people just for a quick payday. So I learned it out. In terms of goals, I would say just to feel fitter. I wouldn't even say, I don't even like to say of this is my target weight or this is my muscle, body fat, whatever. It's literally just to be fitter. That's it.
Yeah, it's a good one to have. You know, the training program on at the moment, it's never been for me really about the numbers, and I do enjoy seeing the numbers fall whilst doing it. You know, and that makes it kind of motivational is knowing what progress you're making. But it's always been about, you know, looking at yourself and being more comfortable in who you are, and certainly that's the biggest thing. So yeah, I mean, surviving is a great thing. You know,
Are you feeling much of a difference playing golf, for example? Because that's where I always love seeing.
Well, getting the steps up certainly has, you know, it makes it, going from like, you know, teaching and being in a classroom, walking up and down to sitting in an office 24/7, you know, or, you know, and to now have another hobby where I'm out doing lots of walking, that helps a lot.
But do you know
especially with
what I'm saying is, so you're obviously going through some sort of exercise routine and your diet's a lot better.
Mm.
Say, for example, on the course that I play, it's quite hilly. It's quite a long course.
Yeah.
When I come to the 16th or so, I'm starting to get tired, a bit lethargic. My game can slow down a bit. Are you starting to see improvements, say, towards the back end of your round of golf now that your fitness is being raised?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the more I'm doing it, the less tired I am. But it depends how bad of a round I've had, to be honest. So, you know, if I've messed it up by the third hole, you know, by the 16th hole, I'm like, I don't care anymore. But yeah, no, I think that comes into it. Raj, I'm going to let you go in a sec, but finish the show off with kind of how you're going with, because I know you mentioned, I think it was you mentioned about the overtraining and making sure kind of like you're more disciplined, I suppose, with what you do.
Yeah, then we always talk about it, you know, avoiding highs and avoiding lows, right? Just being consistent, because the risk comes from those big jumps. Whether that's, you know, elite sport or that, the same principle applies across anyone. And so that's just everyone talks about, you know, not doing enough. We can also do more. And so that's something I find myself often getting into, is just doing too much, whether it's whatever it is, right? Someone asked me, you want to go play footy, then I played tennis a day before, played basketball. So it's just, you know, it's just figuring out what the right balance is and having that perspective. I feel like I have great perspective with stuff, except when it comes to my own, like, you know, my own stuff. So it's always easy to have perspective on other things. So you just had to kind of apply that same microscope to yourself. And then to what Owen asked, is it's all about, you know, it's all three. You need nutrition. Nutrition to me is the biggest one, but also the hardest one. And then strength training, you need cardio. They all work different systems. So if you're looking to be truly fit, right, you need all three. You see a lot of guys who are built or who used to be built, they're dying in their 50, you know, 55, because strength training it depends on the type you do, but it doesn't challenge your actual cardiovascular, your heart health as much. So, but then you also need muscle strength too, right? So it's just, there's multivariables. So you need a multivariable approach.
Balance is the word. Yeah, for sure. Raj, thank you for your time, mate. Really appreciate it. I'm gonna let you shoot off because I know you've got a client coming, so patient coming. So yeah, but thank you. Really appreciate it.
I got like 2 minutes. I want to hear what Drew has to say real quick.
So okay, cool. Drew, go for it, man. I know you want to jump in and talk about, because it's not just health and fitness, but we talk about mental health as well. And I know you want to bring up a point about Jadon Sancho.
So you guys know, maybe Doc doesn't know so much, but Owen knows, and you know Tom specifically, because you and I are quite good friends, so we talk all the time. Like mental health is really. Shut up! I'll deal with you later. Mental health is like a really important topic for me. Everyone in my family, for sure, has struggled with mental health most of their lives, and I'll be a bit vulnerable. My mom tried to kill herself when I was a kid. I was suicidal multiple times in my life. My brother has dealt with, in the past, alcohol addiction because of his own mental health. So it's really important for me that people are open about it. And one of the things that frustrates me lately is I think first of all, it's important that a lot of footballers are coming out talking about mental health, about their own mental health, and about how detrimental it is when you get into a place, how it can affect you in so many ways. And there's a lot of players who will respond in ways like, so for example, some people, when they're in a bad spot, they eat their feelings, which is why you can have that fluctuating weight, even when you're in season. And you can see that sometimes. So a lot of people are like, well, why is Jadon Sancho putting on weight? That could be a reason why, right? So what's going on with him right now at United frustrates me because there's been so many examples of players in the past that have either not spoken about mental health and it was too late, or they have and it weren't taken seriously. And 3 years ago, when I still worked for German football, I wrote a piece about Sebastian Deisler. I don't know if you guys remember who Sebastian Deisler was, but he played for Bayern Munich, played for Borussia Mönchengladbach, and at the time he was billed as arguably one of the more technically gifted players Germany ever produced. But because of a rash of injuries and then mental health, his career ended at 29. So when I see all the Sancho stuff going on, and now he's essentially being like scapegoated, being like thrown out in public. I remember a quote that Franz Beckenbauer said about Deisler. He said, Deisler came to our club an extremely introverted person, but no one could have predicted that it would have turned out to be a psychological problem. And when I think about that, I think about what they're saying about Sancho now is, oh, he's reserved, he doesn't want the attention, it comes across as him being aloof and better than everybody else, and that's not, like, for me, that when I see that, that can't be the case, right? You're talking about a player who, when he was at Dortmund, he was alive, completely different player than he is now. Typically, when you see that huge peak and trough, and just a player's outward appearance in terms of if they're playing with joy, if they just seem off, it's usually mental health, more often than not, for whatever reason may have triggered it. So I kind of want to like talk to people in everyone like in the chat, and if you're listening later on, or like just have a bit of grace for people when you don't know what's going on with them. Don't assume, don't put it into the airwaves on social media about what you think might be going on. Wait for them to speak. When they speak, listen, don't just dismiss it. The Dele Alli thing, we're not that far removed from him coming out and the mind-blowing things that he would speak about, but no one ever for once considered that that may have been his problem before. So let's not like repeat history, right? Like, again, grace is important, kind-heartedness, just give people the benefit of the doubt, listen to what they have to say. Don't judge, take them mental health seriously, So Owen, same thing, you, Tom, same thing, Doc, me, everybody, like, if you're struggling, speak to somebody, but like take it seriously. Yeah, that's all I want to say. So
no, it's really well said, mate, and thank you for being vulnerable and open. The listeners, I know, will appreciate it, and this is why I wax lyrical about in the Kai Havertz situation. Like, stop killing the player, stop battering the player. Like, if the expectation is that you want this guy to succeed and do well, do you really think that putting things out publicly and in the open in YouTube comment sections on social media, battering the guy, saying sell this guy, is going to help? It's not. These aren't robots; they're human beings. So treat them like it. It's incredibly frustrating, but I think a move away from Manchester United is the best thing that Jadon Sancho can do for his career, and I'm hoping that it happens. It'd be great to see him go back to Germany. I think where he really discovered himself as a footballer. That would be the great one. But yeah, Raj, thank you for joining me. Tell people where they can find you, mate.
You can find me at 3CB Performance on all social media channels. Thanks for having me on. As always, appreciate it today.
Pleasure, my friend. Absolute pleasure. Drew, thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned before, for being so open with us and for your expertise as well, that are semi-good half the time. I appreciate them. Tell people they can find you, mate. Mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Oh, it's so annoying.
I know. You can find me on XDrumper90 on Twitter, and then linked on my Twitter is my work I do for 101 Great Goals. And then obviously here with you. And then you can also find me at Bruce Banana Podcast, which is a podcast me and Ben Browning, who and Luke and Justin Fisher, we all started recently about just Arsenal stuff. So yeah.
Bruce Banana Podcast that was, so make sure you go and check it out, people. And lastly, Owen, thank you for your time, mate. It's good to have you back. Welcome back, and I hope that we'll be seeing you throughout the course of the season. Yeah,
it's been a pleasure, and thank you, and thank you, Drew, as well for speaking on that topic as well. I think that is something, and just a side note to end on, a real quick one. I think that not just with football players themselves, but fans, if you're so tribal about this game that you have to target other people's players, personally, you're taking it too serious, and it comes down to the fact that I even remember looking back to my own mental health over whatever X amount of years, and I just sort of for once finally linked it to Arsenal were doing well at this time, and I felt great, and Arsenal were doing bad, and I felt like trash. Take a step back. It's just a game at the end of the day, and if you need a break to come back and enjoy it, do that. because life's more important than a game.
I emphasize that so much. My mood with Arsenal is. Right, guys, have a fantastic day and evening, morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. We will see you next week, same time, Thursday, 9 p.m. Enjoy the international break as best you can. And as always, up the Arsenal.